Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's live stream. I want to thank everyone who tuned in to last week's live stream. If you were following me on Facebook and Twitter, you see what this week's discussion is going to be about. We'll be discussing the racial wealth gap. We'll be discussing going more into detail about ADOS and the state of Black society. I'm hearing an echo. If you are in the chat and you hear an echo, could you tap one? Okay, I'm assuming that no one hears an echo. I heard an echo before. So if you hear an echo and you're in the chat, please tap one. Okay, someone says they don't hear an echo, so I guess we'll go ahead and continue. Just a quick announcement. If you're in the chat or if you're going to be tuning in and you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and also tap the notification bell so you can get updates of when we'll be going live. All right. I see we have some people filling up in the room. I'm just giving a few more minutes, just waiting for a few more people to fill the room. I'm hoping everyone had a safe and productive week. All right. And if the echo is gone, just tap one. Just let me know if you hear the echo. I'm not hearing any feedback right now, but if at any time you hear the echo, you can just type one in the chat. Okay, the first thing that I wanted to cover tonight is the continuation of the ADOS, which is the American Descendants of Slavery movement that I'm sure many of us have been hearing about on social media and now even in the mainstream media. And the American Descendants of Slavery movement is a movement that was put together by Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. They both have YouTube channels here on YouTube. And basically, the ADOS movement is a movement that has a justice claim that is coming together to be submitted to the United States government in the case for obtaining reparations for descendants of individuals that were enslaved in America. Some of the things that the ADOS movement is looking to obtain from the government is land, monetary compensation, and some guarantees for college and things to that nature. And what the ADOS believes will happen if reparations is provided is that it will close the racial wealth gap, which is something that was created by the government through through institutions such as the FHA and many other organizations that discriminated against Black people and exclusively locked them out of organizations that would help families to build wealth. And that's one of the first things I wanted to cover here was after the Great Depression, the FHA, the FDA, and other organizations, they gave what was considered as social welfare to many families, to many white families, to help them rebuild and repair and be in the position to purchase homes. The thing about purchasing a home is that when you purchase a home, it provides your family with generational wealth, something that can be passed down from one generation to the next, and it appreciates in value over time. So at that time, what the FHA did in 1934 was they created the Federal Housing Administration, which guaranteed mortgages to white families and exclusively locked Black families out of those mortgages. And that practice it lasted all the way up until about 1968. So we're talking about 34 years of this discriminatory times more wealth than the median Black family. And this was not by accident. This was not because one group of individuals worked so much harder than the other. This was the result of institutions that had discriminatory practices against Black families and locked these families out of being able to build generational wealth. Um, that hurt Black society greatly because if the government allows you to be discriminated against and allows institutions, governmental institutions as well as private institutions, to just basically tell you that you're not going to be included in any type of wealth building that was going on at the time. Like I said, that created generational wealth for families for many, many years to come. When we get into the conversation about the wealth gap between Black families and white families, a lot of people, they tend to think that you're making excuses and that if anyone can acquire wealth and there's nothing holding you back. But you have to study history so that you'll be able to understand things that took place and practices that were instituted that just did not allow Black families to build wealth for many, many generations. And if you think about the conditions of Black society today, that will be able to shed some light for people that like to they like to deny these historical practices, and they like to deny things that took place. And that's one thing that you just cannot exclude from the conversation. The government gave white families a hand out and a hand up during those times, and Black families were excluded from that. They were not allowed to receive those mortgages. Those loans were not guaranteed to Black families. So all those decades of building wealth, Black families were excluded from that. And that, like I said, that hurt Black society greatly. Many of those families never were able to even own a home, which was something that provided wealth for families at that time. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was, as it relates to reparations, is I was having a conversation, and I was told that reparations wouldn't be any good for Black society because Black society does not know how to manage money, and we wouldn't know what to do with the reparations. What I was time where you can't continue to deny the facts about what is owed to Black society. Whatever opinion you may have on it, it doesn't deny or exclude the fact that this is something that's owed. Every other group of individuals that were affected by the government, they were compensated and they were made whole in some type of way. So the individuals that wants to deny Black people that right, I have to question their motives, because I for the life of me, I can't understand why you would feel comfortable telling a descendant of someone who was enslaved in this country that they're not owed anything, that they're not due anything. After slavery ended, a lot of people don't know this, but slave owners were compensated for the release of their slaves. So you have a situation in which slave owners receive reparations and nothing was given to the people that were actually enslaved. I don't understand how anyone could be okay with that. I take issue with that, and I feel as if there's no way that we can continue to deny these reparations. I just feel that, the conversation needs to be had. And now that the conversation is coming up, we can no longer sit back and ignore the centuries of atrocities that happen. Something must be done. Something must be done about that. And it is my hopes that we will be able to come together and figure out solutions to these problems. I don't see anyone in the chat yet. So another thing that I wanted to touch on is Senator Bernie Sanders, he's running for president. And I don't know if you've been on YouTube this week or the week before, but Senator Bernie Sanders has been a strong proponent against reparations. He doesn't feel that reparations is the right route to go to salvage the damages that were done to Black society. And the issue that I have with that is that Senator Bernie Sanders was a strong supporter of the Just Act, which was something that was put together by Congress to help receive reparations for Jewish families. And Senator Bernie Sanders supported that. So I would have to question Senator Bernie Sanders as to why he would be okay with reparations for Jewish families, but no reparations for descendants of slaves. The Just Act, I don't believe that it passed Congress, but what it did was it applied pressure to France to help Holocaust survivors and their families, descendants of those survivors, to receive reparations. So my thing is Senator Bernie Sanders really the friend of Black society that he claims to be? Because if you can say that Jewish families should have received atonement for the Holocaust, but Black families cannot receive reparations for slavery, I feel that's a total contradiction. And we need to hold these politicians accountable, because for so long they have been able to get away with neglecting the needs of Black society. And for so long, we have not put any demands on the politicians to give us anything. And I think that was a grave mistake, because there has been so much time lost that the possibility of some type of advancement has been lost in that time that we were not demanding anything from these politicians. So I feel that what we need to do moving forward, and what I feel we will do moving forward, is we will begin to say we need to be included in the conversation at all times. If we're not going to be included in the conversation, then we are going to come up with ways to begin to withdraw from the system. And a lot of these things we covered in last week's live stream, but I kind of wanted to just re-implement some of the things that we were talking about last week as a carryover into this week's live stream. Because, I feel reparations is something that will be able to repair Black society. And on the other end of that, I don't feel that reparations is the end all be all. Another conversation that I was having was that, we can't put our eggs all in one basket. We need to begin to come up with things that we can do as a community that will benefit us in the case that, reparations are not granted. There's a very strong possibility that we may not receive reparations, and that's one thing that I have to disagree with the one of the founders of ADOS, is that she made a statement saying if reparations are not received, then that's pretty much it for Black society. We'll never be able to close the wealth gap. We'll never be able to catch up and be made whole here in America. And I don't agree with that. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I feel as if we come together as a community, there is so many things that we will be able to do together. When I think about how the Jewish community operates, and I'm using them as an example because they're a very close-knit community. They do a lot of things in concert with one another, and I feel that that's something that we need to begin to do together as Black society. When you think about the way the United States is structured, there are no major Black-owned industries. We have a lot of Black-owned businesses, but we don't have any mainstream major industries that we control. For example, there are no major Black-owned hospitals. There's no schools that are exclusively controlled by Black society. And I feel that that is a mistake. I feel that in order for us to be able to have our best experience and our best quality of life, the things that are of importance to us, we need to be in ownership of that. We need to be controlling the school systems in our communities. We need to control the financial institutions in our communities. We need to control the healthcare industries in our communities. These are all things that if we are in control of these things, we can assure and guarantee that our best interests will be met at all times. Some people, they don't agree with that, but I think if you take a look at how Black society is structured right now, you can't deny that predominantly Black communities um, just don't have the access to resources that other communities have. And unless we aggregate our resources and we pool our resources together, I feel that we will always be at the bottom of the American structure. When America was created, it was really never intended for Black society to have any type of influence or to ever rise above, the things that were happening at the time. And there has been some progress made, but I feel as if there's so much more that can be done. And I feel that we are ultimately responsible for that. We can come together and we can begin to build these institutions and structure our communities in the way that we see fit. At the end of the day, we can't depend on others to do that for us. And I know it may sound strange to some because they're saying that, we're citizens of this country. Why is it that we have to exclude ourselves or, in some instance, segregate ourselves from the rest of society? And, my response to that is just take a look around, who is really thinking about including us in any way that really matters. A lot of times we're excluded from the conversation. When the resources are being, provided, our communities are last on the list. Our communities are last to be. We need to take into consideration that if we're in these conditions, what are we going to do to pull ourselves out of these conditions? Because like I said, reparations, they are due. But what if they never come? Are we going to continue to be at the bottom of American society? Because the statistics support that we are on the bottom, and we are the only ones that will be able to pull ourselves up. At the end of the day, we cannot depend on anyone else to do that for us. That is our responsibility. If anyone would like to add something to the conversation, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. Tonight is going to be somewhat of a free-for-all, so all comments are welcome. If you have anything that you would like to add, you can go ahead and do that. Another thing that I wanted to touch on this week was the individuals that are, have injected themselves into the ADOS movement, and they're saying that we need an African American identity, and at this time we need to go ahead and cut other groups of Black people off, because for so long, other groups of individuals have been coming to the country. They have pretty much excluded us, and they haven't, reached out to us to somewhat of kind of build a camaraderie with us as other groups of Black individuals. And what I have to say to that is, if you think that we are going to be any type of force on this planet, there's no way that we're going to be able to do that by isolating ourselves as so-called African Americans. When you look at the world, people of the same ancestry and of the same lineage, they don't typically disassociate themselves from other groups that are part of the whole of their race. So I feel that that is a big mistake and a flaw in the ADOS movement. When you have individuals stating that they need to exclude themselves, or pretty much exclude other Black people from kind of joining forces and building something together. Kid quote in the comment section says that he feels that we are the only ones that can change our situation. Yeah, as I was stating, I wholeheartedly agree with that. As I was stating, we are the only ones that can change our situation. Depend on others to do that for us, and I totally agree with that. It isn't. There's no issue with stating that reparations are due. There's no issues with that. However, as I was stating, pretty much the saying that that's the end all be all is not the solution. We have to also come up with ways that we can uplift our communities. Kid quote also says reparations will only help if we change our mindset. I agree with that, but that all goes back to the point that we have to come up with ways together to uplift our society, and that will come with a change of mindset. That will definitely come with us changing our mindset. So, with that being said, we cannot isolate ourselves. We're a part of a bigger global family, and to think that we're going to ever be able to achieve what it is that we ultimately want, that will not happen with us excluding ourselves from our global Black family. Okay, Kid quote says exactly. Yeah, there's just no way around it. There's no way that we are any different than any other Black person that is going through struggles in around the world. You know, our struggle is our struggle, and it is unique to our situation here in America. However, you know, there are other groups of Black individuals around the world that are struggling. And I feel until that ceases to exist, that we will continue to have these problems. I personally feel that the Black struggle globally is the reason why we haven't been able to make any real progress. And I'm not just exclusively talking about Black people. I mean all people. Um, until true freedom and true liberation and equality is something that Black people have obtained, we're going to continue to have issues on this planet, and that is something that we can't deny. People like to run away from that, but that is something that we can't deny. The situation of Black people worldwide is the ills of what is going wrong with our planet. You know, we have to fix that. We have to acknowledge that suffering. And the more that is ignored, I feel that that is going to be the reason why we haven't seen any real progress. Um, Another thing that I wanted to touch on as far as the ADOS and their sentiments about Pan-Africanism, which is the Pan-Africanism is basically the unification of all Black nations worldwide. And Yvette Carnell, she stated that she felt as if Pan-Africanism was dead. And if you're an ADOS that feels that way, I would caution you to get rid of that mindset. Because as I was stating before, I don't feel that Black people are going to be able to achieve what it is that we ultimately would like to achieve on this planet if we are excluding ourselves from other Black people. When you think about, the European nations, they all tend to come together for things that are unique to, European lineage. And to a certain degree, I don't see a problem with that. I feel like as Black people, we need to stop being so afraid to own our identity. There's nothing wrong with embracing your culture. There's nothing wrong with embracing your identity. There's nothing wrong with saying that you want Black people to succeed. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you racist. It doesn't make you prejudiced. You know, to me, it's basic common sense. If you belong to a group of people, why would you not want them to succeed? Why would you be afraid to speak up for your people? Okay, so I'm in the comment section, and Forward Movement says, what about people that just want to sit around and collect food stamps and welfare? Um, that comment is a little bit confusing to me. Um, the welfare and collect food stamps, it's a common argument. And how I feel about that is, you are going to have that group of individuals that just don't want to do anything. But I feel as if there's enough of us that are willing to put in the work, we will be able to influence those who, don't have that mindset. As Kid Quote was saying, you know, we need to change our mindset. And I agree with that. But, the one thing that we can't do is that we can't shun those that don't know or don't have they don't have the tenacity to get up and do things. Because if we don't help those that are not really in the position to understand, their conditions, or not want better for themselves. I feel like we're hurting the situation more than we're helping the situation. Sitting around and complaining about the problem and not actually providing any solutions to it, that doesn't help. And another thing of it is that some people, they actually need the food stamps. Not everyone on food stamps is not doing anything. But to those that are, just want to sit around and collect government assistance and don't really want to do much, as I was saying, it is up to us, those of us that, are willing to engage in the betterment of Black society. It is up to us to extend a hand to those people and at least make the attempt to help them change their mindset and want better for themselves. I don't believe that, looking at an issue and not coming up with ways to solve it is going to help us. So I hope that provides some insight to your question, Forward Movements. Basically, we can complain about the issues all day, but if we don't provide any solutions to those issues, then we're just as much a part of the problem as the individuals that I feel have created the situation for us. The Forward Movement says, in a sense, isn't asking for reparations just trying to fix integration? I don't feel that asking for reparations is trying to fix integration. Reparations, the purpose of reparations is to repair a wrong and provide atonement to, a wrongdoing that was done, an injustice that was done to a people. I don't particularly feel that you're asking for integration by asking for reparations. Like I stated before, I feel reparations will provide a leg up for Black society to be able to repair the damages and the loss of legacy and wealth that could have been acquired at that time. Asking for those reparations does not mean that you want to be assimilated into white society. And besides that, some people, they prefer integration. I'm not a strong proponent of integration in the sense that people see integration. I feel that strong societies can integrate with other strong societies. And what I mean by that is, I don't feel that, Black people shouldn't be around white people at all. I don't feel that, in situations that warrant us, hanging out together or being friends or anything like that. I'm not against that, but I am against groups of individuals that don't necessarily share the same, lineage, trying to, mix into societies. And the reason I feel that way is because, unfortunately, there are some individuals that feel as if, they're not going to share. They don't want to share resources. They don't want to have their culture or anything like that impeded upon. And if that's the case, then I do feel as if Black people are going to have to separate themselves to become a strong community. As I was stating, integration in the sense of Black people assimilating into white society, because essentially that's what integration was. It was a transfer of wealth for Black people, and it was complete assimilation into white society. And honestly, I feel as if that hurt Black society more than it helped, because to a certain degree, we lost a sense of our culture. And we did that because we felt that it would make us more desirable to be able to, pretty much transition into institutions that, quite frankly and quite honestly, were not created for us. And that's why we continue to have the struggle, because you're asking people to do something that is very hard for most people to do. You're asking them to basically give you power, and I don't feel that many people want to do that. I feel that they want to keep a stronghold on a society that they have built for themselves, and they don't want to share those resources. So hmm. Okay, people have been commenting, and I've been talking, so I haven't been looking at the comments, but I'm gonna just quickly read the comments. Patricia Powell says, we have to first stop accepting the name African Americans. There are no Asian Americans. There are no Polish Americans, Irish Americans. So we should not accept being Cape African Americans. I think she meant called African Americans. I would have to disagree with you a little bit, Patricia. I honestly feel that, it doesn't really matter what we call ourselves. We have to know who we are. And what I mean by that is, I don't think that the power lies in whether or not we call ourselves African Americans or Indigenous Americans or Africans or whatever the case may be. I feel that our common denominator is, the struggles that we are facing here, globally, and right here within the borders of the United States. So I don't know so much if I agree that that will that will make a big difference if we're calling ourselves African Americans or not. And I do believe to a certain degree that individuals that come from other countries, at times they do refer to themselves as, they'll put American on there, that subcategory. So I'm not too sure that I feel that that makes a big difference. I don't see how that hurts us, and I know a lot of people, they say that that is not a nationality, but that's the whole point of me saying that we need to define ourselves, for us to define ourselves as we see fit. So that is what I would have to say in response to that. Forward Movement says, do you support the Green Deal? Um, Excuse my ignorance, but could you explain to me what the Green Deal is? Because I'm not too aware of the Green Deal and what that entails. So if you could put in the comment section what the Green Deal is and explain that to us, then I'll be more than welcome to share my thoughts on the Green Deal and how I feel about it. And just to piggyback off of what Patricia Powell asked a moment ago, I would like to pose this question to Patricia. If we're not calling ourselves African Americans, what do you suggest we could use to define ourselves? Because one thing that I will say also in response to that is, we really need to stop paying so much attention to that. I wanted to put into the title of the video tonight was, what are we going to do as a society to move us forward? What things that can we implement into our communities that will help to move us forward? Because as I was saying, reparations is one thing that can be done, but what else can we do? What other things can we implement into our society that is going to move us forward? Because when we get up here on YouTube and we reach out to the community, you know, some people may look at us as if we're just paranoid. And you know what I would say in response to that is I would strongly suggest that you do the research on how bad it is, how bad it really is for many Black communities in this country. You know, in California, there is an entire community of Black people that are homeless. I don't know if anyone has ever been to Skid Row. I've never been personally, but I have done a lot of research on it. And the amount of homelessness there is just it's astonishing. You know, it's staggering the amount of individuals that are there without homes. Um, Okay. I'm trying to read the screen and, you know, kind of focus on the camera and read comments all at the same time. So just, you know, work with me if I look like I'm looking in many different directions. I'm gonna go ahead and look at some of the comments. And the first one, Fort Movement says the Green Deal is basically the agenda that the Democratic Party has for 2020. Okay, could you go a little bit more into detail about that? You know, what are some of the things that they're looking to implement? Okay, Patricia Powell says, if you were born here, you are an American like everyone else. Um, you know, I would like to believe that, Patricia. I would like to believe that we're all seen as Americans. But unfortunately, you know, not everyone that's here in America are granted the same rights as other people that are considered as Americans. You know, we can say all day that we're all Americans, but if you know, you really look around and you see the conditions of certain Americans in comparison to other Americans, then you will see why I feel the way that I feel. I don't feel that we can honestly say that we're all Americans until we deal with the issues that we're up against. As I stated in the beginning of this video, the racial wealth gap between median white families and median Black families, you know, the median white family has 10 times the wealth of that median Black family. And like I said, that's not by accident. That's something that was done by design through policies and practices that were implemented by our very own government. So, in order for us to feel as if we're Americans and not make that distinction, then there are things that would need to take place before we can come together under one umbrella and say that we are a racially progressive society. To think that, I feel is it's just naive because the conditions that African Americans in particular face in this country, it does not support that. It does not support that we're all one America. That, you know, a lot of people like to, you know, they like to say that, but when you break down the numbers and you break down the data, it does not support that. It does not support that all Americans are having the same experience here in this country. And until we deal with that, um, I feel like it's a contradiction to say that we're all Americans because that's not that, you know, the data just does not support that. Okay, Ford Movement says the Green New Deal combines Roosevelt's economic approach with modern ideas such as renewable energy and resource efficiency. Okay, I don't really know how that's going to translate into reparative, any type of reparative advancement for Black society. How are Black people going to benefit from that? How are they going to benefit from that economic approach? Um, are there going to be any specific things that Black people would be able to obtain from that? Okay, Forward Movement says it basically states all Americans should live economically equal. Okay, well, there's no way that we're going to be able to have equal economics when you have over 200 years of wealth building that Black people were excluded from. We have to deal with that first. We have to deal with what was before we can actually talk about what is and what will be. Trying to erase and ignore over 200 years of economic depravity rather is not going to fix the problems. It's very troubling and it's very frustrating when these politicians come up with all these new deals and things that they want to implement, but they are not dealing with the legacy of slavery and how that hurt Black people in this country. As I was stating before, if we're not going to deal with what was, then we can't even begin to talk about what we would like to see happen moving forward. It's very disrespectful, in my opinion, to ignore that legacy and then tell Black people, okay, everybody's going to be on equal footing now. How do you close that gap? How do you bridge that gap? How do you, um, just it's frustrating to me. Like I said, it's very baffling to me because I don't understand how we're going to, um, you know, provide all this wealth that was stolen. There's no other way around it. That wealth was stolen from us because essentially we didn't have the opportunity to build that wealth, and that was the law of the land. Forward Movement says, "What would you propose?" Um, what I would propose is something along the lines of what was done during the New Deal after the Great Depression. As I said, white families were guaranteed access to certain capital that Black families were locked out of. Some of those examples were the guaranteed mortgages. As everyone knows, home ownership is wealth. So Black families, so that they'll be in the position to catch up and to bridge that gap, that racial wealth gap. If they're not willing to do that, there's no way that you would even be able to begin to say that all families will be able to live equally. How do you even provide that equality when there's so much of a head start that was given to one group of one segment of society that another segment of society was denied? There's no way for everyone to be on equal footing. So that's one thing that I would definitely propose. Specific set-asides that are going to put Black families in the position where they will be able to acquire a form of wealth and a form of generational wealth. Like I said, home ownership is one of the ways that can be obtained. And also land grants. That was another thing that was provided. People were able to have very relaxed qualifications in order to receive land. They were also given grants to receive education on how to maintain that land. So, there's a lot of things that can be done, but trying to put everyone on equal footing when they're not starting off in the same place, that is, that's a failed agenda before it even gets started. So, the Green Deal, I don't stand behind that. I don't support it. I don't feel like it can even begin to be taken seriously until some restorative action is taken to make up for a loss of legacy and a loss of wealth that took place over, the duration of centuries. And then when Black people were actually, somewhat, put in the position to do something in society, then you had practices such as redlining, which restricted um, Black families from having access to capital and having access to being a part of those deals that were taking place when America was recovering from the Great Depression. Black people were, they were pretty much left behind to get whatever they could, however they could. And just to say that we're going to all be on equal footing is very arrogant, and is ignoring everything that happened to those families and that legacy that they were not able to provide for their descendants. Another comment, what about civil rights and affirmative action? Are you saying they didn't do anything for Black people? How much does the government have to do for Black people? The government, when you look at it, what civil rights actually did, it was an extraction of wealth from the Black community. So when you want to talk about wealth, civil rights and affirmative action did not provide any tangible things for Black people as far as them being able to build wealth. The civil rights movement integrated society, and it did away with Jim Crow and all those sorts of things, and it allowed Black people to have access into certain institutions. However, there was still lots of discrimination that was taking place, because as I always say, you can make something the law, but you can't really change the hearts and minds of individuals if they don't want to change. So that is something that we must deal with. We have to deal with the reality that there's some individuals that, just don't believe in equality and fairness for everyone. So the civil rights movement and affirmative action, it only did so much. It didn't, when you look at it, and especially how the civil rights movement and affirmative action, as time passed, many of those rights that were guaranteed to Black people in particular, they began to get spread out. One of the biggest recipients of affirmative action today, in all honesty, is white women. So, when we talk about affirmative action in the civil rights movement, there was something that I was watching, and someone said the biggest mistake that was made when the Civil Rights Bill was passed is there was no time limit that was put on that. So initially, things were looking up for Black people, but then a lot of those rights began to get scaled back. So, that is one of the main reasons why we continue to face the situations that we face, because those laws will get passed, and then there is no stipulations in there that is saying, okay, these particular things that are in here are not interchangeable. The civil rights movement, it went from Black people and it ventured off into minorities. And honestly speaking, minorities is too broad of a blanket for it to actually do anything that is specific to Black people. Minorities include Asians, Hispanics, white women. Those are all groups that are considered as minorities. So once that meshing up of things within the civil rights movement, once that began to get meshed up into different groups, Black people found themselves being the ones to receive the resources last. So I hope that answers your question as far as the civil rights movement and how much does the government have to do for Black people. In all honesty, the government has not done enough for Black people, in my opinion. I feel that the government did a lot of things for individuals that migrated from European countries. For example, when Italian Americans arrived here, there was a lot of poverty within the Italian community. There was a lot of gang violence because, poverty leads to violence. I think that's something that we like to ignore. Communities that are drenched in poverty, there's a big chance that violence and crime is going to ensue because they're scraping for resources. So what the government did for those individuals in Italian society is that they came up with a deal that was specific for those communities, and they gave them a hand up to help them to get out of those conditions. And then, as far as Black families go, there has never been any real legislation put together that dealt with poverty in Black society. Guaranteeing someone that they're able to go to a certain school or, go to a certain part of town, that never dealt with poverty in Black society. And until we deal with the poverty and the economic situation in Black society, then we cannot say that the government has done what it is that they need to do. So I hope that that provides some insights for forward movement. I personally don't feel that the government has done enough for Black society. Okay. Before we close, I'm going to take a few more comments if there's anyone that would like to add something to the conversation. If there's anything that you feel that we could be doing in the now to help improve some of the conditions in society. A kid quote says, "We control our own destiny." That's absolutely correct. I've always been a strong supporter of us controlling our own destiny. But when I say that, there's certain things that are due to us, I'm not saying that as a way to accept reality that when it's all said and done, we are going to be the ones that are responsible for changing the conditions of our society. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if we are going to go with the notion that we are just one big American family, we can't leave a portion of that American family out in the cold and, just do nothing for them. As the so-called one big American family, we all pay into this system. We all add to this system. So for Black people to continue to be denied every time they solicit the government and ask them for something that is going to help improve the conditions of Black society, for people to take the position that they have no right to ask that, I feel that's very I feel that's a very ignorant and disrespectful approach to that. There's no way that you can tell me that, Black people don't have the right to ask for something that is going to be specifically for their communities when everyone else does it. Every election cycle, groups come together with an agenda. They come together with an agenda and they bring it to those elected officials to say, this is what we want for our communities. I don't know if anyone is following me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is in the description box. So if you're not following me on Twitter, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I posted a story on Twitter about an institution, Wells Fargo, that has committed $125 billion to help members of the Hispanic community with home ownership. I take issue with that. And I'm not saying that Hispanic families don't deserve to have homes or, don't deserve help. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I take issue with that, specifically because Wells Fargo is an institution that stemmed from another institution that had a hand in slavery. That's wealth was acquired from being involved with slavery. So how is someone like me, a descendant of a slave, supposed to feel about an institution guaranteeing money and specific set asides for a community, but someone can have the right to tell me that my community should not be asking for these things or should not feel that they have the right to be entitled to these things. I don't agree with that. And, that is something that I really wish that Black people and other groups of individuals would just stop doing and stop saying and stop spewing that rhetoric that Black people don't have the right to demand what is rightfully owed to them. How would you feel if you were the descendant of an individual that went through the things that my ancestors went through, and you're supposed to be living in this post-racial and progressive society, and you can look at the conditions of your community and you still see poverty, you still see poor school systems, you still see um, housing communities that are not fit for living. How would you feel if you were in that situation? I feel that it is disingenuous for people to pretend that these things are not a reality for many Black communities in this country. And, like I said, to have an institution that had a hand in slavery, to not um, to not come up with a program that would bring some reparative and restorative, you know, um, just to help repair those communities. It's a slap in the face to the descendants of those individuals that went through that. So as I was saying, that's something that I really wish that, especially us as Black people, that we would stop doing that, that we would stop feeling like we don't have the right and we're not deserving of asking for the things that are owed to us. Um, that mindset is not going to help us. It's not going to help push us forward. Because in all honesty, if you don't feel that you deserve something, what do you think the next person is going to think about that? We need to begin to build our confidence and not feel that we're asking for a handout, because it is not a handout. It's something that is owed to us. And like I stated before, there's other individuals that received hand ups and handouts from this very government that likes to tell us that we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. That entire bootstraps argument is completely dishonest, because there were entire generations of people that received exclusive handouts from the government while our ancestors were being deprived and neglected of those rights. So I'm not going to allow anyone to tell me that I don't have the right to feel that I should at least bring the conversation up about what is owed to me as a descendant of an individual that went through hell in this country. I definitely just will not stand for that. Okay, I'm reading some more comments here. It says ADOS is not trying to separate other Black groups. Please listen to what Yvette and Antonio are saying. We are happy the Caribbean Blacks are not getting reparations. Did they need ADOS? Oh, he says, correction, we are happy Caribbeans are getting reparations. Did they need the ADOS? Okay, I think this is Deidris, if I'm saying that right. Um, I don't disagree that ADOS shouldn't be pushing forward with their movement. I'm not saying that they don't have a legitimate gripe with the government. When it comes to the point of asking for reparations, ADOS is well within their rights to do that. But I think that we're being dishonest if we're going to say that certain people that have injected themselves into the ADOS movement, I think it's very dishonest of us if we're going to say that some of these individuals are not trying to separate themselves from other Black people from other nations. And like I said, I feel that that is taking a step back. I don't feel that that is providing any type of progressiveness for Black people as a whole. You're right. I don't know if the Caribbean has received reparations or if they're going to receive reparations, but I'm all for it. And if they have a movement that there was anything that they needed for me as an ADOS to do, I would wholeheartedly support them. I feel that that is something that is going to hurt us a lot more than it's going to help us. So, and I'm pretty much well aware of what it is that Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell are saying. And to a certain degree, I don't disagree with them. But where I have to disagree with them is the fact that they're saying things such as Pan-Africanism is dead. And if Pan-Africanism is dead, it's up to us to revive it. There's no way that 40 million people or 45 million people, whatever the number is, they're saying that it is of ADOS in this country, there is no way that we're going to have any type of footprint on this planet with those numbers. All Black nations need to come together under the banner of our common ancestry, which is Africa. Africa is our birthright. And we need to come together under that banner. The separation is regressive. It's not progressive. So I hope that I was able to answer your question or comment with insight that will help you understand why I have to disagree with Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore when it comes to that particular stance that they have when it comes to ADOS. Because I have heard Yvette Carnell say that, in all honesty, I've heard her say that ADOS needs a group of individuals to be beneath them. And when she said that, she was referring to immigrants. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that any group should be up under any group. And if someone is to argue with that and say, well, you're living in a capitalistic society with systems and governmental systems that are going to be fair and equal for all people. Okay, before I wrap up, I'm going to take a few more comments if there's anybody that would like to add something to the conversation. If not, I'm going to start bringing it to a close. And I want to say this, and this is kind of, a continuation of what I was saying last week. And this is for all groups of people. This is not just for Black people. If we intend to live in this nation that we call America, if we intend to live here and, under the guise that we are all one people and we're all one united nation, I feel that we need to be honest with ourselves. I feel that we need to come to the realization that in America, the conditions of certain groups of people are far worse than it is for others. And if you're someone that says that you're about equality and fairness for everyone, I really would suggest that you take an honest evaluation and an honest assessment of what is going on in this country and up to what it is that we say we are. I don't feel that we are. And I feel that until we get serious about having the insight and dealing with the reality of what it is that we're going through in this country, then there's no way that we're going to move forward together. And, the reality of it is that until that takes place and until we're all having that similar experience here in this country, then there will not be any peace. And I feel like that is just the reality of what we're up against. So if you are an individual that feels as if there is something wrong, it is up to all of us to change it. If we're going to live together under the guise that we're one united nation. And if we're not going to do that, I feel that we need to just be honest about it so that there won't be um, any way for people to hide behind this one united nation notion that we're propagating to the rest of the world. Us being honest about the situation is the only way that we're going to move forward. And it's up to us if we're going to move forward together or separate. So, that is going to be it for tonight's live stream. I would like to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. I know there were some people that wanted to tune in that said that they weren't able to, but I want to thank you for even considering being here tonight. And if you're not following me on Twitter, my Twitter is Shelly Speaks 1. My Facebook is Shelly Speaks. And soon I am going to be creating an Instagram. There were some people asking me, why don't you have an Instagram? So I will be creating an Instagram soon. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will see you all next week.